Welcome on into the reckoning. It is Friday and time to not only wrap up the week, but dive into some new issues. I'm glad that you're back with me, and I'd love to have you in today. If you have any sound offs you'd like to make on the show, let me know. A few different ways you can do that. Of course, the social media streams are always up and running. If you want to find us on Facebook, Rumble, and Instagram, X, anywhere you go, look for Real Talk Radio, hop into the live chat. I'll see you. And, of course, on the Real Talk app, if you don't have that, go download it. Your local app store, you can find us, Real Talk 93.3. I'd love to have you in the big old chat window over there. A lot of fantastic folks to get to know. You share some memes. We're always sharing and plucking from other people. And then, of course, on the phone, 636-224-6300. Love to hear from you. And, of course, I'd love to make sure as well that you patronize our fantastic show sponsors that keep us going, keep the lights on around here. Grace Hauling, Brian Dawson Roofing, the Prestige Financial Group, that's Mr. Steve Tornatore and his crew, and, of course, the Washington Dent Company, the magic man himself, Mr. Kevin Gotch. We appreciate them all so much for making it possible for us to come and have great conversations like we get to do each and every day. Give them your business. Know that you are supporting people who share your values and are going to be an excellent source for you. Product services that they offer, bar none, absolutely wonderful. And I'm very glad to have another of our Real Talk advertisers in the studio with me today. Mr. Jay Freeman, Dr. J from Titan Hill Armory is in the studio. How are you doing, sir? Thank you for being here.
I am doing phenomenal. Thanks for having me here today, Ryan.
Well, I am so thrilled to be able to talk to you because, like I said, when we communicated about this segment, my comment is we have had some massive constitutional Second Amendment decisions in the last few weeks. Actually, a few big ones. And I know that you're deep in this world. Of course, Titan Hill Armory, great advertisers here on Real Talk, a huge source of freedom and freedom seeds across the St. Louis area. But there's a lot of questions that people are working out, and also there's a lot of questions moving forward that all of us have constitutionally and what it means. And that's why I thought I'd love to get your perspective on this because we've heard from a lot of lawyers, a lot of constitutional minds. Everyone has their questions, but I'm curious what the dealers are saying because this affects dealers more, if not as much as those of us regular citizens who are saying, okay, so there's this whole new realm of things that are now open and free to the rest of us without special permission from the government to exercise my constitutionally guaranteed rights. There's all sorts of stuff swirling. So first of all, I guess I got to ask, I mean, what's the attitude been around Titan Hill, both from you and your folks, but also from the customers coming in the last couple of weeks? I imagine there's been a lot of celebration and celebratory purchases.
It's been ecstatic. I mean, this is the first time since 1934 that we as Americans have been able to do this. So it's a fantastic change, and it is very well welcomed. Mm-hmm. That's the positive side. The downside is that we had the court case come in, dropped on, we had a verdict, and now there's just this complete ambiguity. Nobody quite knows how to deal with it, what to do. Because, again, first time in almost 100 years we've been in this position.
Yeah. And we were talking off air. I'm grateful for this because, man, when you dive into the history of the National Firearms Act and then subsequent the Gun Control Act, especially the NFA in 1934, it was put forward through Congress and into law on such false pretenses. I mean, for crying out loud, we're blaming Bonnie and Clyde and the gangs running around, and we have to do this for public safety. They're not walking into gun shops. They were raiding police armories. Like this was one of the classic beginnings of we're going to go ahead and restrict law-abiding citizens under the guise of saying we're going to stop the criminals. I mean, that's what we've always heard since then. But it really started that way with the NFA, the first huge national gun control movement. So to have a judge come in and just make a very clear-cut, no, this is blatantly unconstitutional, but then to stay inside of his lane and say, now I can only rule on the people in front of me, it was both refreshing, but also kind of frustrating because now that leaves a lot of the rest of us that aren't plaintiffs in the case to start wondering, now what does this mean? Who am I a member of and who am I buying from?
Exactly.
So we're going to need some clarity on that, across the whole country. And as we were talking, I mean, where do you hope that comes from? Rules changes or courts? I mean, what do you think as a dealer is really going to actually give some clarity to people on, okay, National Firearms Act is now off the restriction of these few things. We can move forward. Where does that need to come from?
Great question. And I think what we have to understand is what the court gave us is a ruling that says in some instances, some products are legal for some people, and it's extremely vague. So they did give us some guidelines out there, but what is not clear is how we're supposed to execute on those. So, for example, we all understand that the judge declared that the National Firearms Act affecting suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns is unconstitutional. And the reason for that, very simply, is that the 1934 Act was passed under the taxing power of Congress. It was a tax. The big, beautiful bill that took effect in January this year for suppressors removed the $200 tax stack down to zero. So immediately, of course, courts heard the cases that were filed. The Trump signed the big, beautiful bill on July the 4th of last year. July the 5th, court cases were filed, and we got an early Christmas gift that said this is unconstitutional. So that's great, and that's fantastic. The problem is now that as dealers, we've got to figure out how to deal with all this stuff because we are waiting on the government to give us guidance. And one thing the government does very poorly, unfortunately, is give legal guidance in the area, especially related to firearms.
Yeah. And what really burns my biscuit about this is we've done this fight recently as well. This whole, we're allowed to do this as Congress because it's a tax. That was called Obamacare.
That's correct.
That one sailed through and held up in some courts, unfortunately, because, Congress has the power to tax and they're calling it a tax. We've seen it and had a lot of kickback, but this one's just been ingrained into public consciousness long enough that I think a lot of people just take for granted, those have a special layer. And there's been a few crying out in the wilderness saying, no, this is unconstitutional to begin with, taxing power, quote unquote, or not. But that getting stripped away, when I first saw the big, beautiful bill being drafted, I was very excited by the House version that just went full bore for gutting the NFA. I forget if it gutted the NFA or completely overturned the whole thing. I can't remember. But then, of course, the Senate parliamentarian had her way, and it moved it to zero. And my first thought was, no, I don't want to get on the list for free now. I want there to not be a list. There's not supposed to be a national registry. That's illegal and unconstitutional. And your tax qualification is the only reason that it's gone on for so long, really. So I didn't see at first, I fully admit, the strategy of, no, if they remove that to zero, all we've got to do is drop the right lawsuits and move forward. And we think we can win this case. And sure enough, here we are. But there were a lot of others. If I'm not mistaken, there were several cases peppered across different jurisdictions and different areas right after the one big, beautiful bill. Are there any others that are still ongoing that we should pay attention to? Obviously, this GOA silencer shop has gotten the most attention from the victory in Texas. But are there any others hanging on that you've been paying attention to that we should watch?
Yeah, there actually are. The Texas case was a joint case. They combined the silencer case with the Jensen versus ATF,
right.
And they combined those together. And that's where we got the ruling. There were several states that were signed on to those plaintiff groups. Missouri was not one of those because in the state of Missouri, there's another case, Brown versus ATF, that we're watching with a very similar set of circumstances on it. So we're hoping for some follow-up rulings that even further harden and give clarity on where we stand.
Let me come back to that because I want to hear about Brown, especially here in Missouri. I'm curious, but again, we got Dr. Jay Freeman on with us from Titan Hill Armory. Great advertisers here on Real Talk. We'll be right back, folks. You're on The Reckoning. Don't go anywhere. Hey, welcome on back to The Reckoning. To the next segment we roll along. I've got Mr. Jay Freeman here with us from Titan Hill Armory, one of our great advertisers on Real Talk, but of course someone who, you all should be exceptionally interested in now because it's not just the lineup of what they got down there already, but there's all sorts of goodies that are now soon to become, we hope and pray, very easily accessible for more people when it comes to the fun things, especially to the stuff that's not a firearm itself. It's just an accessory that's actually quite polite for your neighbors. That always baffled me that in Europe it is next to impossible to get licensed and purchase firearms, and yet suppressors are essentially assumed. Well,
yes,
be
required.
kind to your fellow hunters and your neighbors. You have to have a suppressor if you're
Go to New Zealand, you can pick them up off the shelf.
Right.
It's cash and carry.
It has always just been mind-boggling to me that somehow these things have just in the culture in the United States, probably because they've been under the NFA so long, it's just, silencers make guns more deadly. What?
Yeah.
No, they don't. I mean, especially with something that's breaking the sound barrier, it's still loud. There is no, oh my goodness, criminals are going to suddenly, no, they're not. Criminals aren't going to add an extra 10 ounces to a pound to the end of their teeny little gun. They're going to have scratched off serial number Glocks from the black market.
They want the big bangs.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of funny if you take your nice Corvette and rip the exhaust system off of that and gun it and roll down the street. See what law enforcement has to say about that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nuts. But as we were just talking about the other side of the break, there were a lot of different cases. They really, Gun Owners of America, Silencer Shop, all the folks who spearheaded this did a wonderful job because they dropped in. To your point, we had Brown VATF, I think it was, here in Missouri.
Yes.
There were replicated cases essentially across multiple circuits so that we will ensure something somewhere gets through. It was an excellent strategy that was brought forward. Like, really, this is probably one of the most unifying moments I've seen in the Second Amendment in a long time, where people figured out we're going to band together, we're going to do this right, we're going to make sure that we take advantage of this great opportunity we have. And we got a result that we wanted out of Texas, which makes sense, I guess. But that's a good thing. So let me ask you this before we move from the legal thing. I know that there have been a couple others. There's a big decision in Texas as well on the Freeman receiver rule, which, folks, if you're not familiar, this is really relates to the world. I guess you could call them 80% lowers. The build your own personal gunsmithing, which we have a long and rich history of in the United States,
Right.
has been under fire for a long time. Finish this firearm off at home. You build it from the status that it's in this kit, and then you have at home a firearm. Now, it doesn't have a serial number, but there's, different state regs, and if you want to transfer it and all sorts of things where that changes. But I got to ask, as we're looking at some of these other cases, one thing that makes me curious here, whether it's the NFA decision out of Texas or some of the others, even under the Trump era, the DOJ and the ATF have still had a little bit of a checkered response to some of these things. I mean, it was, after all, shocking to us that the ATF decided not to appeal this case, or at least has
not
indicated
yet.
that
Right.
they're not going to appeal. They still have, a few weeks left. What was it, October 5, you said?
October 5th, yes.
October 5th, they have to appeal. Hopefully they won't. That's what we're hearing. We talked with the U.S. Pardon Attorney yesterday, says there's still ongoing discussions, but it sounds like that we are moving to the constitutional side. What's your take on the Freeman receiver rule? Because this was a Biden-era thing that then the Trump ATF didn't move away from. Like, they've stayed on some of these policies that we would have hoped a sharp change would happen, but didn't. What's your take? Is there an internal battle going on? I mean, you guys talk with your agents, I'm sure, pretty frequently.
I think there's a combination of things. One thing that we all have to recognize is the Department of Justice is predisposed to defend the laws that they have in place. So no matter what the law is, if it's challenged, generally speaking, they're going to step up and try to defend that law, be it a gun law or anything else. So that's the first piece of it. So anything that happened during the Biden administration, or even like the National Firearms Act from 1934, here we are almost 100 years later and still dealing with that. Mm-hmm. So there's certainly holdovers like the frame and receiver piece on that. And for those of you not familiar with what we're talking about here, basically the history there has been such that you could buy a partially finished firearm receiver, finish it yourself at home. Now you have a firearm that does not have a serial number. You cannot sell that legally, but it is absolutely legal for you to possess. You can make your own firearms. That is an American constitutionally guaranteed right. Most people don't realize that, but that is absolutely allowed. You can build your own guns. In fact, you can and should.
Yeah, and I mean, you find this back. This is in our blood. This is in our American DNA. When the colonists would buy barrels of the firing mechanisms, and then it would get shipped over from France or wherever it came from, and then we would build the rifle here. The barrels were made. We make our stocks. I mean, this is a lot of the long guns of the colonial era were homemade firearms, essentially in the same right or close to it.
Absolutely, and nothing has really changed other than the proliferation and availability of the parts. The quality is much higher, so you could get all kinds of different parts and build exactly what you want, how you want. That way, you know exactly what it is, how it's made, how it works, and you're intimate with.
Yeah.
So that's a very good thing to do.
Yeah, it is. And it's fun, too. It teaches you a lot more about the platform that you need to be familiar with. Because this is, don't get me wrong, and we talk about it all the time. I tell you folks, this is a great hobby. It's a fun sports shooting. I love, of course, there's use in it with hunting. But really, at the bottom line, the armed citizenry that we have in the United States, guaranteed by that Second Amendment right, this is our last bastion against tyranny. This is exactly why it was put in the Constitution. The founders witnessed what happened when the centralized power decided you're too troublesome to be armed any longer, and welcome to the flashpoint of the shot heard around the world. That we were talking about that again off air. We had big fights, and there was even the movement for independence, but the shot heard around the world, the real kickoff of hostilities, began when a gun confiscation scheme came forward to Lexington and Concord. That is when it kicked off. That disarmament is huge, and especially during COVID and so many of the other dicey things across the world we've seen, places like Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom. When that is not just an armed citizenry is proliferated, very well and everywhere, your citizens can be subjugated very quickly in a world of ways. This has kept us free as a nation for 250 years.
Absolutely. And that's if there's one thing that I wish that all of your listeners would really lock in and understand, is that the entire point of the Second Amendment, it isn't about hunting, it isn't about target shooting. It's about the ability to defend yourself against a tyrannical government and to ensure that the government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. So anytime you hear laws that say, oh no, only the military and police can have this, that is 180 degrees off of the intent. That is absolutely wrong, and we should resist that with every fiber in our being.
And that's why I also appreciate, at least around here, we have a lot of good ones. You go to a good concealed carry training course or whatever the case may be, if you find yourself in the position where the off-duty law enforcement officer is teaching you or saying, well, the reason you're here is because I'm not going to fit in your pocket. Even just in a civil realm, not even in a tyrannical realm, trashy dirtbag wants to do you or your family harm in your home or outside of it. The police's job is not to save your life. It is to clean up the mess and find out who did it, because that action happens in seconds or minutes, and it's not the police time of 911 response. That you really do, even inside of the bubble of a nice legal society, you have to defend yourself and your family. And practically speaking, this is the path forward to ensure that your family stays alive in certain situations.
Absolutely. And we love and support law enforcement by all means.
Yeah.
But what everybody has to realize, too, is that the same courts that are ruling on the National Firearms Act and the things that we're talking about have also ruled that police officers do not have to put themselves in danger on your behalf. They are not required to. And that means there may be a time and place where you are your only line of defense, and you have to be prepared to defend yourself and your family.
Yeah, we see it every day. It's one of my favorite seconds, the armed citizen corner of whatever magazine it might be, where they describe over and over again someone who the reason they or their family or children are alive is because they had access to and knew how to use a firearm. That this is what, this is it. You are your first line of defense, and sometimes the only line of defense that you'll have. But let me ask you this. So back to our NFA case. How is this shaking out? Obviously, I've talked with GOA and we've gone around and around. What's coming out of the Texas case, as it stands right now, with no future or with no further clarification, right now, it sounds like if you're a member of a certain organization like Gun Owners of America, or there's a couple of others, I think the National Shooting Sports Foundation, I forget who all was involved in this. You're a member of one of those.
Right.
If you're purchasing from a certain kind of company, a Palmetto State or Silencer Co., and I forget the third qualification. I had one in my mind, though. But if you meet these qualifications, you're covered. The injunction where the court said this is unconstitutional, it can't be enforced upon you, that should be there for you. But the question is, there's a lot of other NFA-related paperwork and items and tracking that goes into this. What's the reality of it look like for people here in Missouri who say, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to go buy a suppressor or something else, and then SBRs? We might have to save that for the next segment, because that's a whole different world. What's that look like for someone here in Missouri wanting to do something?
Absolutely. As you sit here in Missouri, and if you're going to come into my shop or any others, here's what you're going to run into. There are 3 classifications or group of people that are injuncted right now. The first one is anybody who is purchasing a suppressor that is sourced through one of the plaintiff groups. In plain English, that's a wholesaler. That is the Silencer shop. They're the largest dealer in the U.S., so if you buy a suppressor that comes through them, either directly through them or through a dealer like me that sources it through, you are injuncted and can qualify. Number 2 is the brands of suppressors that were signed onto the lawsuit. That includes Palmetto State, B&T, Silencer Co., etc. So if you're buying one of those products specifically, that's covered. And then number 3 is advocacy groups. If you're a member of Gun Owners of America, the Gun Owners Federation, a handful of other groups. GOA is probably the easiest one to become a member of. And it's important to note that the court clarified that it covered past members and future members. So you can sign up. I am not a spokesperson for GOA, but I firmly believe in what they're doing, their message. $25, you sign up, you're a member, and you are now covered under that injunction. So those are the 3 classes of people that would be covered.
Okay. And I totally agree. I have no sponsorship. I have no affiliate code. I have no nothing for GOA. But if you head to gunowners.org, $25 to become a member, you get yourself into a very excited class of people right now, because a lot of these things are breaking. Let me pick up those details. I hear my music on the other side of the break, because there's more. There's a lot of stuff people don't know about when it comes to how these NFA, well, now formerly, maybe NFA items are tracked. Let me talk about that, and then I have questions about SBRs and SBSs, which is a whole different animal. Let's hit it on the other side, folks. Again, Jay Freeman, Titan Hill Armory's in with me. We're going over all the gun things you want to know about. We'll be back on The Reckoning. Hey, welcome on back to The Reckoning. Into the next half of the hour we go. Make sure you say a big shout-out to our fantastic show sponsor, keeping the lights on this first hour for us, That is the magic man with the magic hands, Mr. Kevin Gotch. Washington Dent Company. I want to make sure that you get him in to your contacts. Go find him on Facebook, Washington Dent Company, or on the phone, 636-575-0681. That's 636-575-0681. I tell you all the time, folks, it's not just a good mechanic you want to have in your lineup. You need to be able to take care of the outside of your vehicle as well. That thing keeps you going, takes you to and from your work, all the things that your family has in mind. You got to take care of it from the outside in as well. And I don't want to leave you to one of those big body shops that just has a corporate line to report back to. I want you to have a small business owner that knows his craft, does an excellent job on your vehicle, and will get you back up and running somewhere that your budget can actually afford. It'll probably blow your insurance deductibles out of the water, too, because those have gotten really high. That is the Washington Dent Company. Find them on Facebook. You'll see some of the before and after photos. You will not be able to believe it. I can't even find the dents, and I've seen them. The before photos just don't make sense in my brain. That's why you need to call Kevin today. 636-575-0681. That's 636-575-0681. Or on Facebook, Washington Dent Company. You'll find him there. Trust your vehicle, this big investment you've got carrying you around on the highways. Trust it to someone that you know shares your values and does good things in the community, does good things for you, their customers. That is the Washington Dent Company. We appreciate them for getting us up and running. Tell them that you heard about them on The Reckoning. Thank him for sponsoring this program. But back to it, our conversation. Another fantastic advertiser here on Real Talk, Titan Hill Armory. Got Dr. J. Freeman in here with me. And we're just covering not only the ins and outs. I want to get into that. So who actually can on suppressors and what do you expect? But then I'm curious before that, if this all goes through, there's about to be an explosion of some really cool stuff, and you guys are on the front side of that. Do I hear correctly through Little Birdies that you are beginning to make your own line of silencers and suppressors now?
Yes, actually we are, and we dropped an advertisement, started kind of a funny thing on timing. We'd planned the launch on this, and I'd had the advertisement on 93.3 ready to go Thursday of last week. So the very first week that this lawsuit, the court case comes down and hits, we're actually releasing our own internal suppressors. We're happy about that. They're made right there in Washington, Missouri. And
That's awesome.
like you said, we're really going for a decent quality value level can that's got a economy price on it. So
Yeah.
we're happy to be bringing those forward.
And it's not just one or two. You're planning on a lineup of calibers in the future here.
Yeah, we are. We started with the launch of the 22 caliber suppressor and extend the offer out. Anybody that comes into our shop and he says, "Hey, we heard it on 93.3, $199. Everything right there." And this next week, we should be launching our 9mm and 30 and 223 cans. So we're coming out with the full line.
That's awesome. You're hitting all the biggies. You're about to make a bunch of people very happy. And I know that we were talking about that on the legislative front. There was at least one, I forget the exact name of it. I think it was Mike Koslow from here in St. Charles County had one of the something about the safety, the hearing, the something act, basically.
Oh, the Hearing Protection Act.
The Hearing Protection Act. That's what it was. But I mean, the bottom line of it, if we don't have interstate commerce to deal with, we're making and manufacturing suppressors here in the state. They're owned by people in the state. The transactions are in the state. Go pound sand, NFA, because we don't deal with interstate rules. Well, that's now, it seems, out the window because we've got a whole new world ahead of us. But that kind of brings us to this. So someone says, that's awesome. I'm coming to get one of my new 22 silencers because I would like my little plinking gun to just be even more fun. What are they actually looking at the reality when they walk into Titan Hill Armory? If they're a GOA member or if they're buying, well, obviously that's not covered. I mean, how does this look like from a dealer end? What are you guys looking at or dealing with right now?
That's a great question. And just to be flat up honest with you, right now, you walk into my shop, we are still following business as usual under the National Firearms Act. I hate it. I hate having to do that. But here's why. It's really simple. We are required to meet all of the ATF transaction booking requirements and to meet all of those rules. Violations of that can carry basically 10 years in jail and a $250,000 fine. And the ATF, unfortunately, has issued zero guidance on how to handle any of this. So, for example, most people don't realize this. When you buy a suppressor from a dealer like me, you have to go through all the paperwork, and you get that. Well, even for the manufacturer to send that suppressor from their manufacturing facility to my shop, we have to fill out what's called an NFA Form 3 and get the government permission to move that from the manufacturer to me. So everything that I'm carrying on my inventory is listed as a National Firearms Act dealer item. So it's all in there. If I start selling these over the counter, there is no process whatsoever to take those out of the NFA database right now. So an auditor comes in from the ATF and says, hey, where are all these suppressors? And I said, well, I sold them over the counter because the judge said I could. Well, that presents problem number two. How do I know who's qualified? Well, we just said if you're a gun owner of America, well, how do I evidence that and show an auditor that a year from now that they're there? How do I prove that? So we're trying to get all of this information from the government on how to proceed going forward, doing this legally as fast as we can. But we're also trying to do the right process.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I certainly ask everybody. Please have patience with us and all of your other local gun stores out there. I did call around to 20-some different stores this last week to see the status. There are a few places in town who are selling over the counter. There's 2 of them that I found so far. And I think that's going to expand going into next week.
And that's, as we were talking off the air, I likened this to kind of, it almost feels like a game of Red Rover, where you got all the government agencies standing on one side of the field, except they're waiting for you to begin moving. Like they're waiting for, for citizens and for, dealers and FFLs and SOTs, the people who can manufacture, transfer these things. They're kind of waiting for them to make the first move. It feels like maybe there's something coming. This is all very fresh and recent. I recognize nothing in government comes quickly, but that's the thing that I'd like people to appreciate here is that you might be able to walk into Titan Hill Armory or somewhere else and prove and say, look, here's my GOA membership card. I'm buying this suppressor through this dealer, through you, and it's of this brand. I'm covered. Well, that's great. They can look at you and say, you're covered. Well, what about the dealer? Because there's all these background rules that have no clarification and weren't affected by the judge. How suppressors move and all this other paperwork for the dealers, there is no clarification, even as we're getting little bits for what you as a citizen can do. You guys are kind of up the creek without a paddle.
That's absolutely correct. And there is some individual liability to you as a purchaser also. I want to make sure I couch this appropriately. I don't see it as a big risk, but there is some. Let me give you 2 examples. Number one, you buy a suppressor. You do it over the counter like we're talking about, and 2 weeks from now, the Department of Justice changes their mind, decides to appeal. Well, you are now in possession of an illegal item. What do you do with that? Well, court history or case history suggests that the ATF would probably come out with guidance and tell you that you have to turn them back over to the government pending the outcome of that case. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that while the NFA was declared unconstitutional for suppressors and short-barreled rifles, only certain parts of the code were struck down. Other parts were left in place. So, for example, all of the language that governs how these items transfer between states is still in place. So, in theory, if you buy a suppressor as an individual in the state of Missouri and you take a job 2 months from now in Oklahoma and move over there, legally there is no mechanism for you to take that suppressor to the state of Oklahoma. You are a felon if you take it with you. So that's examples of those little gotchas that are hanging out there that nobody has any idea how to deal with right now.
Yeah. So just keep that in your back pocket, folks. As you find dealers who might be a little slow to this, it's not just them that they're looking out for, which I can appreciate. I don't want these businesses to get caught up in years in prison and $250,000 fines. They're also looking out for you because there are a lot of questions that I would argue Titan Hill and places like that. You guys are looking out for individuals too, saying, "Well, hold your horses. I don't want you to get in trouble in the future or now, and I don't want to get in trouble. We'd like to keep this going. So let's be wise about this. Not slow, but wise to make sure we're getting all of our ducks in a row." You referenced it there, though. So the SBRs and SBS, short-barreled, for anyone not aware, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns have been governed under the NFA in addition to suppressors. And, of course, those AOWs, any other weapons. Oh, my goodness, that big all-cloaking category. But I would say, why does this matter to me? I could just get a rifle with a 16-inch barrel. Well, have you ever tried to maneuver inside your home if you're going to defend it? Man, a short barrel really matters, and a suppressor on the end of it really matters. Like, these are important things you want to know about. I hear my music. Let me ask you on the other side what this has to do with short-barreled rifles, because that's a whole different world.
That's a whole different one. There's a big gotcha.
I was going to say, that's a big gotcha, because this isn't just as simple as one whole item. Now we're into how the firearms, especially in the AR platform, how this works together. And we got pieces that are serialized, pieces that aren't. Let me get that on the other side. Folks, we'll be back. Another segment real quick with Dr. Jay Freeman, Titan Hill Armory. Back in a flash. Hey, welcome on back to The Reckoning. And to the final segment of this first hour we go. I got one more. I told you I'd try to hold you for an hour, and here we are. I'm going to keep you for an hour. I'll let you get home. It does. Man, these live hours go so fast. But I'm excited. Anytime I meet another, well, I don't know if I'll quite call you a panhead, but you hear the intro come in and know it's a Skillet song. We're on good grounds together.
Heck
so.
yeah,
Heck
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh man. Back to the reckoning. I got Dr. J. Freeman in here with me, Titan Hill Armory, one of our great advertisers here on Real Talk. We're going through some of the parts and pieces of not just the entirety of the Second Amendment fight. Of course, a lot of fun things on the market that are coming out, including the new lineup of Titan Hill suppressors that are starting to drop. The 22 can is out. That's awesome. And you guys have a few more things on the horizon that are coming up. Is that right? Did I hear there's some more projects, or are we not announcing those yet?
Well, we've been working on the range forever. We got, I think we're waiting on the last steel beam. We're going to have our test range there in Washington open.
That'll be neat.
So we're working on that, and there's the other project we're working on.
Oh, that's
quietly,
fine. I wasn't even talking about that one. I know you told me something off air that you all don't know, and I'm excited about it. But no, I just meant the range. I knew that was coming.
Yeah, range is coming. I think we're really close on that. And what I'm so excited about there is, we've got, I'm guessing 600-700 used guns in our shop, and I really want to take that open and say, hey, you want to know how it shoots? Go shoot it.
Yeah.
Not just rental guns, just take any of the used guns. Go fire them.
You get to test drive used cars. I don't know why you can't test drive used guns.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that always, to me, that seals the deal. It's like, if you don't want me to buy this, you don't want me to shoot it. Because if I shoot it once, I'm going to be like, yeah, I need it now. I need it. We know how that works. Good sales tactics.
Hey, we're not salespeople. We just stick something in your hand and let you play with it.
It's true. It's true. Oh boy. But here, let me tackle this last topic in our few minutes here left. Because as we've said, from this NFA lawsuit, big victory from Gun Owners of America, Silencer Co., Silencer Shop, National Shooting Sports Foundation, lots of fantastic folks getting us this ruling. The judge in Texas enjoined or put down these are unconstitutional. You can't restrict these items anymore. It was suppressors, SBR, short barrel rifles, short barreled shotguns, and AOWs, any other weapons. We've talked a lot about the suppressors. That's still needs a lot of clarification, but it's a little more cut and dry compared to short barreled rifles. And of course, suppressors and AOWs. I'll just focus in on SBRs though. What is the situation with those? Because now we're into a world of pieces that are the firearm, the serialized part, and pieces that aren't. How in the world are you guys working this from a dealer end? What's that look like?
I'll start by letting your audience know exactly what we're talking about here. When we talk about a short barrel rifle, we really mean anything with less than a 16-inch barrel.
Right.
There's other nuances on overall length and that kind of thing, but for simplicity, it's usually 16 inches. If you cut it down less than that, the government considers that a short barrel rifle, and you used to have a special permission slip to get that. That was part of that National Firearms Act process. The judge declared that unconstitutional for the plaintiff groups that we talked about. That's great, but there's one other little gotcha here. As is usually the case in federal law, it's very convoluted and complex. These are also governed under the 1968 Gun Control Act, and there's a segment in there that says that you have to have a permission slip from the Attorney General of the United States to be in possession of a short-barreled rifle. Most people don't know that because it was automatically handled through the NFA process. So that's what that was, is that was your permission slip. When you filed your paperwork, you got the okay. Well, the only mechanism that exists right now to get that permission slip from the Attorney General, the only mechanism is the National Firearms Act process. So the judge declared that unconstitutional, says you don't have to do it, but you still have to have the permission slip, and the only way to do it is that process. So here we are. We're kind of stuck.
One other line or set of lines in one other law makes this a whole more complicated process, just because the process that was there was struck down, but there's still a reference to another piece of law that wasn't addressed in this that is at play here.
That's
interesting. Because I've seen, in the world of some of the manufacturers who are in this, I think Palmetto State's about the only, well, I don't know if they're the big ones that have to do with the, not just silencer world. They're the big ones. Of course, there's some others. I'm forgetting the name of the company, the other one, but the Palmetto State, of course, produces massive production of AR-15 style weapons, which, boy, I love them. I mean, I know a lot of people rag on them for having cheap guns. They've gotten a lot better and have a lot of neat lines over the years. But their whole purpose is we're going to take D.C. Heller, this old Supreme Court decision, what was it, 2008, and say, common use firearms. Let's make the AR-15 platform as commonly possible in the United States of America as we can. I love that. That's fantastic. They've been the ones who have clarified the most on this, but it's still pretty convoluted in their world of, if you want an SBR and you don't want to do the NFA process, here's what we recommend. But even then, it sounds like they haven't really addressed this issue of it being mentioned in the Gun Control Act of 1968.
That's correct. So we're waiting right now for clarity from the government on how people are able to get that permission slip, if you will, outside of the NFA process. And right now, there is no other mechanism.
Are there any of the lawsuits you all have been paying attention to? Because as we said, there was kind of a big, giant patchwork of them put together. Any of them specifically trying to deal with the Gun Control Act of 1968 to go into some of these other issues, or not yet?
There are multiple. There's always suits out there. At any given time. There's multiple suits. And in fact, the ones that I would encourage people to pay the most attention to actually isn't necessarily a 1968 specific. But the Supreme Court agreed to combine and hear cases out of Illinois and Connecticut that is going to challenge that AR-15 or the assault weapons ban on the very basis that you're bringing up, because the law says that anything that's common use, a common gun, is certainly protected under the Second Amendment. Well, Connecticut, for example, ruled that the AR-15 is not a common gun and therefore is exceptionally deadly and therefore should not be allowed, even though it is the most common firearm in the country. So. I think we can probably predict how that will play out in the court.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the Supreme Court's been fairly well founded recently in its jurisprudence and being doctrinally sound. They're not making things out of whole cloth quite as much as they used to.
Right, especially on this. I mean, the Bruin decision a few years ago was just a gem from Clarence Thomas, but there's been good Second Amendment decisions since in some of the narrower cases. And to your point, I mean, the AR-15 is America's musket, like that,
Absolutely.
The most common gun, thanks to Palmetto State and the hundreds of other companies that have just mass produced them. And also the fact that it's really a fantastic platform. Eugene Stoner was a genius. He put together something wonderful. So the bottom line of all of this is SBRs, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns. You want to get something under 16 inches. There are a lot of clarifications needed from that. And then the suppressors, there's still some stuff there. Based on your experience, and I'm not looking for you, not giving names and phone numbers of the local ATF guys, but you guys are obviously, as a dealer, in touch with them very, very regularly. Are you hopeful from anything that you hear that they recognize, okay, we got to take some steps forward on this? Or are they really kind of playing coy because maybe they're hoping a court comes around and tells them to? Have you gotten an idea of that, or do they have urgency here?
I think, in fairness to our ATF friends, it's not as much that they're trying to entrap or play coy as they're waiting to see too. They don't know what their bosses are going to do with the DOJ in terms of the filing, so it's kind of a wait and see. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us are waiting for that clarity, for somebody to come out and say, here's the rules, here's the rule book, here's what it says. That's probably not going to happen, unfortunately. What is going to happen is, like you said, the Red Rover, we're going to see more and more dealers such as us and others step up, take moves that we think are constitutionally sound and safe that we can make with appropriate legal coverage. And then over time, it'll be a series of amendment rules from the ATF, court cases that get filed, and rulings that come down that actually provide that governing framework.
Yeah. And this is where, folks, I'll tell you, pardon me, there are going to have to be, I think at the end of the day, citizens who want to exercise their rights and dealers who want to facilitate that, who are going to have to stick their neck out kind of in front of the crowd and maybe end up entangled in some what could be big victories for us out of a court case, but it's going to be very expensive for them. So this is why I think not only supporting all of your local dealers going to Titan Hill, but also making sure you're backing Gun Owners of America in some of these places is important, because we're going to need them to sweep in and say, we will file that suit. We would love to jump into this because there's going to have to be some court clarifications moving forward. Even if the ATF starts really putting out rules and making this a better place, there's still going to be folks that stick their neck out. And there's going to have to be lawsuits to clarify further, I think.
Absolutely. I think I told you when we were talking off air, I likened it to we got a divorce decree, but we're waiting on our former ex-spouse to tell us what the outcome is here.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be the best source of information.
No, it's not. Bureaucracy moves slowly. And quite frankly, we're dealing with, not one of the better reputationed branches of bureaucracy here, especially. The Department of Justice has been getting cleaned up, but boy, the ATF has some very checkered past. You want to do a deep dive, I encourage you to go and take a real historical look at Ruby Ridge and Waco, and you'll see the ATF has had their hands in some really sticky stuff over the years. This is going to be a process. We need time. We have to have patience with Titan Hill and some of the other folks, but I think we are moving in a good direction. I'm very excited for it.
We're super excited about this ruling. We're ecstatic that the Department of Justice overall does not seem to be fighting this, even though, as you and I discussed offline, there is some argument to say that if they were to come out and challenge it, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing because it would force a court decision on this rather than just a simple ruling saying, hey, there's no tax, so it's gone.
Right.
Because what we need everybody to understand, the tax was taken away basically at the strike of a pen through a congressional budget act. The exact same thing could happen in reverse, and it could be right back.
Right. It would not be the worst thing in the world if we had to fight appeals to the Supreme Court and get a national precedent from the Supreme Court that clarifies this a lot farther than just the Texas decision, but a lot of other parts and pieces until there. Dr. Jay Freeman, Titan Hill Armory. You can find him online, TitanHillArmory.com. I encourage you to do that. Head on down to Washington. Good folks down there. I like them. And thank you so much, Jay, for spending some time, giving us some clarification.
Pleasure.
Folks, we'll be back. We got headlines to cover. We'll move off. There's never a good time to move away from guns, but we're going to do it for the second hour. There's more things I got to tell you about. We'll be back on The Reckoning after the news.